Thank you, Jenny Beth, and thank you, Millie. And I want to thank everyone for being here and participating. You know, the great thing about CNP is it's not just telling about what's happening, it's the people that are actually doing the job. And Carrie Severino, who runs the Judicial Crisis Network, is here with us. She appeared on television 104 times, has 6 children under age 12, and yet was willing to come and to fight that battle on behalf of Kavanaugh, and then to be here with us. And I want to say thank you to her. And then Leonard Leo was here last night as well, who was committed to getting the proper judges. And then again today, as wonderful folks, you know, the swamp didn't want Donald Trump to be president. And they tried every trick in the book all during the campaign. And then when he won, they tried to sway some of the electors to not vote the way that they'd said they'd done it. And then as he's moving into the White House, struck that group of Obama, FBI crooks, went in, and while a dedicated soldier, 33 years, general, Mike Flynn, is moving around to some boxes in his office, Strzok comes in there and strikes up a conversation, which he then interpreted as an interview. And in the process said that he lied to them, and a man who had served his country faithfully and risked his life had no idea how to cope in this kind of a swamp. And so then they threatened to destroy his family and all. And so he said, if I leave and I plead guilty to lying, would that get you off my back? And that's what they wanted. They wanted to begin this. But some weeks after that, they then kept wanting to twist him more and more and more, so they've never sentenced him now. It's gone on for over 2 years. But one of the finest lawyers in America, a person who understands how this works, voluntarily came up and came alongside him. And her name is Sidney Powell. And Sidney... And let me encourage you, if you have not read her book, you really need to read it, because those of us who love America, we tend to always want to say good things about organizations, but there are people who are dedicated to taking America down. And one of the places that they go is to the intelligence services, and because they don't have to give account to people, they can hide. And when I was on the Intelligence Committee, one of the 5 people that during the time, you might remember the Walker brothers, this Walker fella, he had his son and would give him the codes to all of the communications in the Navy. And they're changed every 6 weeks. And every time he'd get a new one, he'd give it to the Soviets so they could monitor all of our correspondence and things. But one of them was a fellow by the name of Howard, who became the station chief, the premier CIA agent in Moscow. Now that's the creme de la creme. That's the top of the pyramid in the intelligence services. In order to get that, he had to compete with everyone else. He had to be an excellent agent for years after year after year and get all these awards until finally he got all the way to the top after 34 years of service. And when he was then given he was briefed on all of the assets that we had, all the communications, all the people that we had in different locations and where we're getting information. We had a listening device in Brezhnev's automobile, for example. And once he was briefed on all of that, he then took it all and handed it to the Soviets and defected. Now that means that fellow was in the CIA for 34 years, faithfully waiting for the day that he could stick it to America. Well, there's a handful of those folks that understand who Donald Trump is. Donald Trump is an American, and he's not a politician. He's a person that wants to do what's right for our country. And not to digress, but Paul Teller is here, and he and Sarah Macon have made it possible for us to be in the White House at least once a month to meet with folks. And so they brought in 5 members of the Office of Management and Budget. Now, OMB is the organization that controls everything. When they say the president does this or the president does that, well, who does it? OMB controls every dime that is spent, every contract that is signed, and every regulation that is made. And so if you're the Secretary of Transportation, you want to make a change, you have your hearings, you put it in the Federal Register, and all, it then goes to OMB, and OMB decides whether or not it goes into effect. And as they were briefing on some of the things that were going on, one of the questions that some of us asked, they said, when you meet with the president about individual things, have you ever had to struggle to get him to do what you thought was right. These were all good young conservatives that are at OMB. Every one of them gave a little testimony, gave examples. Never once did Donald Trump overturn a decision that they recommended for politics. Now, I believe part of that is because he's not a politician. And he doesn't know the ramifications of what happens way down the line. He just says, this is the right thing to do. We ought to do it. And so consistently, we are in a battle for the swamp that has distorted what America can and should be. And the people that are involved on the front line of that are the people that are here. A quick one would be Tom Fenton is, you might remember when Lois Lerner was shutting off from the time that she arrived over at the Internal Revenue Service, that she wouldn't approve any of the Tea Party 501c3 agreements. And so when the Republican Congress began to investigate, they said, well, we'd really like to cooperate, but her computer blew up. You know, we're really sorry about that. And so then after a few months of that, then they went back, well, you had correspondence with somebody, probably because constituents said you can do something here. It wasn't all on her computer, it had to be in others. So they came back about 6 weeks later. You'll never guess what happened, you know. All their computers blew up, all together. And Tom Fenton, one person, went into the court and sued for freedom of information for why she had turned down all of these Tea Party folks before the election and for over a year and a half. And they got up and said the same thing they said to the New York Times, the same thing they said to the Washington Post, the same thing they said to the Congress. That is, well, we're just really sorry that all the computers just broke on them. And the judge says, excuse me? It's the testimony of the Internal Revenue Service of the United States of America that you have no backup for your communications. Is that your testimony here to this court? Well, at that point, they thought, whoa. We can lie to those silly guys on Capitol Hill. They'll fall for anything. But, you know, if we lie to this guy, we might go to jail. And so they asked for a recess. He said, I think that'd be a wise thing to do. And they agreed to come meet the following week. This was on a Thursday. On Friday, they went to Capitol Hill and said, you'll never guess what we found. Why? And so the people that are actually, oftentimes when you go to events, there'll be reporters or other people that will tell you about what's happening. The people that are at CNP are the people that are actually doing it. And Carter Page is a person who's been a faithful patriot, available to his country. And lo and behold, since they knew him and knew all about him, they tried to just leverage him. And Carter, I'm so glad that you're here with us. And then another one would be what's happening with China. And that program today was just outstanding. But when the country was trying to put together a constitution, after 5.5 weeks, it began to break apart. And it looked as though it was going to disintegrate. That chance might never come again. And one of the 4 people in the room, it was only 4 that had signed the Declaration of Independence in the same room 11 years before. One of them was Benjamin Franklin, considered the most respected man in the world at the time. And he asked to speak. He said, I'm an old man. He said, but one thing I have learned is that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall without his notice, is it probable that an empire could rise without his aid? So we've been instructed in the sacred writings, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Well, I believe this, that we shall be no more successful in this political building than were the builders of Babel. Therefore, I move. And he asked that they have, he said, in the conflict with Great Britain, we had daily prayer in this room. Our prayers were heard, and they were graciously answered. Have we now forgotten this powerful friend? Or do we imagine we no longer need him? He goes on and proposes that America go to prayer, and that they never meet without asking God's blessing. Well, they did that. And over the next 5 weeks, they wrote the Constitution of the United States, creating the oldest government on the planet, one of the youngest countries, the oldest government. The rest of them changed repeatedly. And so they said, you know, let us preserve this. Let us understand from where our strength comes. Therefore, no one shall hold a position of public trust without first swearing allegiance to God and the Bible. Every official document, regardless of whether it be the declaring Groundhog Day or the Internal Revenue Service, at the end of it, remind people, done in this the year of our Lord, the 2019th, and of the independence of the United States, the 242nd. And as a result, this nation has been abundantly blessed. Well, this effort to undo this president, I believe, is going to suck our enemies like they have never seen before. They have gone through now, heading into another year, having done nothing but talk about Russia, 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 and then racism, 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 and then and until finally, when they were unsuccessful in the FBI pushing their program, they thought for sure that Mueller would go along with them, and when they couldn't find anything at all, and they came in and took people out of their beds at 5 o'clock in the morning under gunlight and yanked their naked wife out of the shower and frog-marked her around, they thought that somebody would, as they say, if they didn't sing, they would compose. That is, that they would say what they wanted to say, and they couldn't find anybody to do it. And so finally, it looks as though the Central Intelligence, the CIA folks, have just had it with the FBI, and so now they've come up with their fellow that they were watching the president, and they came up with an artificial charge and about this telephone conversation, and never in the history of the United States has a telephone conversation been made public. As you know, it's against the law to tape a homeless man along the street. So the idea that a president's going to reveal something that he had with another president, but this president is not a politician. So he turns to Mr. Zelensky, he said, they're saying we said things we didn't say. How about if we release it? He said, that's fine with me. And so they release it. And so they'd gone for 3 days saying how that 8 times he'd asked. And of course, all their sycophants on television, you saw Joe Scarborough and all those people, 8 times he asked, 8 times. Everybody had the same song sheet. Now that they got the script, there's no 8 times. You can see that. So as a result, I believe what they're going to do, they're going to go ahead and commit suicide. I think they're going to try to impeach him. And then, when you run for office, I had a list of every county of what they wanted and how I could deliver for them. I built 4 bridges over the Ohio River, and then we built a new highway. We had things that we would say, these people are going to go back in just a few more months, and they are do-nothing Democrat Congress. They've done not a blessed thing. And I don't care how much they try to throw dust in the air, we can go to each one of them and say, all you did was go to Washington to stand on the street corner and scream at the president. And I believe we can properly have such an overwhelming success that it'll be the best thing that's ever happened. And God love them. I think God's on our side. There are so many things that, okay, enough. I am really, really optimistic. This is not smart, what they're doing. And the people can see through it. They for 2.5 years, they heard Russia, Russia, Russia. Now you're going to flip it to Ukraine like that. People can see through that. One little quick thing as an aside about, while we're talking about Benjamin Franklin. You know, Benjamin Franklin, in that little speech that he gave to rally the troops back together to form the Constitution, he spontaneously gave, you can look it up, it's June 28, 1787. There are 14 scriptural references during the course of that speech. You know, this is a fellow who gave $25,000 to George Whitefield to fund his efforts to bring about the Great Awakening in America. There's no charges of promiscuity on the part of Benjamin Franklin prior to 1920. After World War I is when they began to deconstruct America's founders and make them into all of these various charges. But we're now beginning to see, I think, we're writing the thing, truth overcomes error, and we have truth on our side. Final point would be we are blessed to have a wonderful, wonderful speaker tonight. A man who has dedicated his life to doing what's right for the country. He was twice elected to the state legislature without an opponent. That's a good program. It has a little bit to do with Louisiana, I think, but nevertheless, it's he then went off to Congress, but prior to that time, he was a constitutional lawyer defending the causes of free speech and religious liberty. The NRA has given him an A rating. The retail merchants, the hero of the Main Street, NFIB, the guardian of small business, perfect rating with Life versus Planned Parenthood. His wife, Kelly, is a licensed Christian counselor. He volunteered and contributed also faithfully to the Louisiana Policy Council. As you know, as each state focus on the family has those in each of the states, and Mike was helpful there. But there are basically 3 legs to a member of Congress. One is you have to be a good politician, or you should be a good politician. Another one is that you have principle, that is, that you stand for something. And then the third one would be that you have effectiveness on Capitol Hill. Now, sometimes there are people that are effective on Capitol Hill, but they don't have any real principle. And there are other people that are really great politicians at home, but quite frankly, they're not any good when it comes to the others, and nobody really knows that at home, and so they go along forever. But Mike is not only well respected and beloved in Louisiana, but he is solid on what's right and wrong. But then above and beyond that, he was chosen recently as head of the Republican Study Committee, and with this, I'm rounding third, heading for home, because the Republican Study Committee was formed by three people that were all members of CNP. And one of them was Ed Fulner, who recognized that in 1963, as the conservatives were making headway towards the 64 Goldwater success, in 63 they started to form a thing called the Wednesday Group, and it was made up of John Anderson and the other liberals in order to fight those conservatives, and that was a caucus in the Congress. So finally, about 1970, the conservatives said, you know, we need something like that, and so they began to form the Republican Study Committee, and the Republican Study Committee was the group of conservative members of the House. But then some years ago, about 6 or 7 years ago, the Speaker, John Boehner, said, I'm tired of those conservatives. So he went around to all the rest of the people in the caucus. He said, I want you all to join the Republican Study Committee. And so they all did, and so then they elected a leader that would do whatever he asked him to do. Republican Study Committee lost its impact. I have the last paragraph of the book in which Ed Fulner describes it. He says, if the Republican Study Committee ever loses its principles, a new group will arise to stand by the conservative. And that's where the Freedom Caucus came as a result. Well, now that the other folks have gone, the conservatives at the Republican Study Committee have gone back and elected Mike Johnson as head of the Republican Study Committee. Plus, as we know, we had Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan and others as in the Liberty Freedom Council, and as a result, we now have a good batch of conservatives that, as we go through the success of this next election, we can then take the leadership that needs to be done. If we were to choose a person to represent our values, who would be skilled, likable, lovable, loves his country, and loves the Lord, it'd be our speaker tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, the Congressman from the 4th Congressional District of Louisiana, Mike Johnson.
Well, thank you all so much. It's a great blessing. Welcome to Louisiana. We're delighted to have you. And this is just a surreal moment for me, Bob. I mean, my life has become a series of surreal moments, serving in the circus of Washington right now. But just being introduced by Bob is such a surreal thing for me. I was telling him earlier tonight when I got here, it was almost 20 years ago. I was a young lawyer, and I was at an event where he was speaking about America's founding principles or something, and I was so inspired by not only what you said, but how you presented it. And that has continued to serve as a model for me. And if Kelly was here tonight, she'd tell you, I evoke your name in our household all the time because I want to be like Bob when I grow up. And I do my best, but it's surreal for me to be introduced by you. I'm trying to wrap my head around it. And tonight, as I've walked around, and I mean, probably all of my biggest heroes are in this room tonight. I mean, I grew up in the movement. I was in the back joking with Matt and Anita Staver a little while ago. I literally was the bag boy for Matt Staver when I began. And Tony Perkins, I was his bag boy. I'm not kidding. I was a young lawyer, and I just wanted to learn, and I followed those guys around, and Kelly Shackelford was one of my mentors, and I'm looking around. I was telling Morton Blackwell I'm in Congress primarily because I called him for help, and he got me here. I owe you all so much, and I can't speak tonight without saying how much that has meant to me and to so many countless others. Everything that all of you do, only we won't know this side of heaven how big those contributions are, but it is just so encouraging for me to just be in the same room with you. So thanks for the surreal opportunity. Well, thanks. I got an assignment tonight. I'm supposed to give you some inside baseball on the impeachment deal, but you've already heard such an eloquent presentation of where we are. I don't know what more to add to that. I love, Jenny Beth, this National Day of Action is a beautiful idea, and please go get Lucy and the rest of them because they're making our lives miserable in the House Judiciary Committee. I mean, look, that's one of the committees I'm on, and House Judiciary has one of the broadest jurisdictions of any committee in the Congress. I mean, so many important things are within our purview and our responsibility. I'm the ranking member on the Constitution Subcommittee and the Committee on Constitution and Civil Rights, and we haven't done anything of substance in the 116th Congress. It's all investigations and impeachment charades, and we call them out on it. You've seen, because it's all televised constantly. And they are. I mean this they're hell bent on taking down Donald Trump. Their visceral hatred for the president guides their every action. It's just almost hard to believe. And they started the impeachment process right after the man took his hand off the Bible. I mean, at the oath. I mean, this whole thing's been going on forever, and they keep changing the narrative every time there's some new revelation, they say. But it is a charade, and we have to stop it, and the way to do it is from the grassroots up, for the people to let these folks in the swing districts understand this is not a game. I agree with you. I think they're going to go too far, and I think it's going to inure to our benefit in the end. And so we're going to let them do it. In fact, we're trying to dare them to do it, as you may have seen. The president is, and we are. We have said, Madam Speaker, let's have a vote. You want to do it? Let's do it. Bring it. Let's do it right. Let's go for it. Go for impeachment. We're goading them now into it. I am the only nerdy constitutional lawyer, constitutional law attorney on our side of the dais in judiciary, so I'm sharpening all my pencils, and we're getting ready for this. But we're gonna go with it. Look, I wanted to, if it's okay, if you'll permit me, I wanted to just kind of maybe back out to about 20,000 foot, and instead of getting into all the details of impeachment, because I know I'm preaching to the choir, the honor choir tonight, I really wanted to talk to you about something a little bit more broad, and that is something that I've heard many of you echo tonight in sidebar conversations about where we are as a nation. Because this is not a game, what we're doing right now. I had another surreal moment last night. I was in Washington, and somehow I found myself invited to a small dinner that Charles Koch was having on the Hill. And he had, he has the Stand Together group now, movement that he's working with, and he had 25 of the top conservative philanthropists in the country and just people doing some amazing work. And they asked me to address to them what I thought the biggest challenge facing America is. And before I did that, we went around the circle, and each of these 25 persons shared their own heart. And I was writing down what some of the things, the question was, what do you think is the greatest challenge facing America? And this erudite group, some of them said, somebody said loss of consensus, somebody said lack of trust and civility, systematic division, the entitlement mindset, the lack of self-reliance. And there was some really thoughtful kind of expositions of all that. And so I was sitting there taking it all in, and I was to speak to the group, and I said, there's a common thread, a common theme through everything that I think everybody said, and I would summarize it up in simple terms that maybe you could describe all this as sort of a national memory loss. What I mean by that is it's a lack of knowledge that has metastasized, and throughout the country. And Scripture teaches us very clearly that our people perish for lack of knowledge. And I said, I summarized this when my wife and I have developed this little Sunday night seminar. It's the only time we have. We have 4 children under the age of 18, and she's a Christian counselor, and I'm playing Congress and all that. And so our only spare time is Sunday evening. And so we go around to churches around our region, and we do this seminar that we put together, just birthed out of necessity, and we call it the Answers for Our Time Seminar. It's not very clever, I know, but what we do is in a 3-segment, we talk about, because we're in Christian churches, okay, what is our biblical worldview? Let's all remember that, right? And then what was America's founding principles? I channel Bob McEwen and do all that for about an hour. And then we have the 3rd segment, and it is, where did we get off track and how do we get back to it? And so this is elemental stuff, and everybody in this room, you could teach this seminar. It's nothing earth-shattering. We just put it all together, and what we find is we go to these churches, and we'll have 300 people show up, or 500 over here, and we go for 3 hours, and nobody leaves, because it's Sunday night, and you think everybody's got to get home. It's a school night and all that. They sit, and they take copious notes, and people's mouths are open. I mean, this is not earth-shattering stuff, okay? This is what all of us know intuitively, but I'm telling you, no one knows it anymore. And so at the end of 3 hours, we're like, okay, well, sorry, we're out of time, and nobody leaves. Please stay. So these turn into 4-hour seminars, 4.5 hours on a Sunday night, and no one leaves, and we open it for discussion, and it just, don't take for granted that anybody knows anything anymore. Our people perish for lack of knowledge. So I was with this group last night, and I said, I would summarize all this to say that my great burden, and probably the burden that some of you have, is that impeachment is not the problem. Impeachment is a symptom, okay, of the problem that ails the country. And the problem is, if I had to summarize it, I would say that we have become a nation of biblical and historical and constitutional illiterates. We have. I see this in my town halls. I did my 70th town hall last week. We're on a 2-week recess of Congress, and we have a broad cross-section. My district's a microcosm of the country, and I have Democrats. I had a couple of self-described socialists in the front row a couple weeks ago. I love it, right? Bring it. And so this is how I do a town hall. I say, all right, look, everybody I know, everybody take off. Just do this. Let's do this. Let's just be Louisianians together. Let's don't be Republicans and Democrats for a few minutes here. Take your party hat affiliation off. Put that over here, if you will. Just do this. Play along. Take your preconceived notions about personalities and do this for me. Just put this over to the side, okay? And let's just talk as a family, okay? A people of the same state. And let's talk about two competing visions for government and society, and I just unpack. I use the town hall as like a civics classroom, and I go through basic Econ 101 and Civics 101, and nobody knows this stuff anymore, and I unpack what limited government, free market principles, and all this, and over here is socialism. I don't tell them the name of it till I get to the end. And now these are the two competing visions. These are the two results that are certain to befall each one, and given all that, and all things being equal, and parties over the side, which one do you think is going to work better for us as a people, right? And everybody goes with this. It's okay, well, I'm a Republican because the Republican Party is advancing these principles. Now, I would be in the Orange Kangaroo Party if they were advancing these principles. It's not about the magic of the party, it's about the timeless principles. And so we get people converted in town halls. And there's nothing magical about my town hall. I'm just saying this is the only time anybody's hearing this. And the reason it's so important to do town halls, and many members of Congress don't do it anymore, is because this is the only place now that we can get the message out. Because the media is censoring us and silencing us, and we don't get the platform. And we have a few outlets, but not enough. We have the Washington Times, thankfully, but Fox News every now and then, and some other things. But we're getting outnumbered, and we have to do this. So I made a very bold proposition when I ran for RSC chairman. I was recruited to do this. I'm in my second term of Congress. This is way above my pay grade, okay? But they said, oh, this guy's a nerd. Maybe he can do it. And so I ran against a much more seasoned member of Congress that you would all know and respect than I do. And I stood in front of the we have 147 members. We're the largest caucus in Congress, but the largest caucus of conservatives, certainly. And we are purifying the group, Bob. We have, as you said, we now have a litmus test, okay? All right? You just can't come join. We go to you, all right? And so I stood in front of the group. This is last fall. It was not yet clear that we would lose the majority, but we were sensing that. And I stood there and I gave my speech to the group, and I said, I want to make a bold proposition to you. All right, you guys know I'm from Louisiana, and in Louisiana, everything is described in either a football or a hurricane metaphor. So go with me. I'm going to use the hurricane. I said, so this is what I feel. I sense this, and I think some of you do as well, and I'm saying this tonight because I believe that you do as well. That we're kind of in a vortex right now, right? Like, so, using a hurricane metaphor, if you are in uncharted waters, which we are as a nation, and you are in choppy seas and high seas, it is easy to lose sight of the horizon, and most people do. In the old days, before we got into digital, there was a device called a gimbal. Some sailors, you may know, it's 3 axes, and it's always level with the horizon because no matter how big the sea and where the ship goes, you can always count on that. And I said, this is what I sense, guys and women, RSC members. I said, I feel like we're losing our way. When I go home, I'm in a very conservative district, but people can't tell me what it means anymore. They don't know, why are you a conservative? And it's just shocking what you hear. Some have no answer at all, right? And I said, so I feel like even in the Congress, we're losing our way. I sense this in town halls, but I sense it in the halls of Congress as well, and it's keeping me up at night. And we're in this kind of vortex where we're losing the fixed points on the horizon. So this is what I propose to you all as RSC members. Let's make RSC great again, okay? Let's go back to the core principles. What are the core principles? If I challenged each of you today, to come up here impromptu and explain what the core principles of conservatism is, could you do it? I mean, maybe you could, but you need to be asking yourselves this, and this is what I would posit to you. If you took the entire Republican Party platform, 180 pages or whatever it is, and you had to condense it down to a half page, Nay, if you had 2.5 minutes in an elevator, how would you, Bob McEwen? I'm doing my Bob McEwen, not intentionally. If you had 2.5 minutes in an elevator, how would you describe our principles? How would you sell this to people? Because we're in this, we got to sell this now, okay? This is what I would propose to you. I said, if you had to boil it down, I've come up with a list of 7 core principles, and see if you agree. I believe it all boils down to these things: individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, and human dignity. I said, okay. I got a similar reaction at RSC. And I said, look, I'm not trying to overcomplicate this. I'm trying to simplify it, that if we can agree on what some basic core principles are, let's just agree on 7. I know you're from disparate districts and different states and different backgrounds and all that, but let's agree this is what defines us as conservatives. Of course, you can unpack each of those or subcategories. And human dignity, for example, religious freedom and the sanctity of human life, all the things that we all fight for. And I said, if we can agree on these core principles, let's start from there. Let's reset and start from where we began. And then let's build the policy development out from there. Because RSC is supposed to be the intellectual arsenal of conservatives in the Congress, and we lost our way there too. Let's go back to the basics and build from there. Everything has to fit within these core principles. Can we get some agreement? And everybody said, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it takes a simple country boy from Louisiana, but that's what we did, and that's what we have done. And so we separated out all the 147 members into working groups and task forces, and everybody's in silos working on these things in their areas of expertise and what their burning, driving forces are. And then we're pulling it all together, and we're developing, switching now to the football metaphor, to the playbook that we are going to run when we take the majority back. And we're not going to waste any time like we did in 2017. We're going to be ready to go. And our guys are ready. They're enthusiastic about this. They're excited. And we're doing it on those core principles. It's never been more important than it is today to be able to articulate those things. You were talking about how we've gotten off track and the nation's gone awry, and we have, the Democrats are screaming racism and all that. I mentioned I'm the ranking member on the Constitution Subcommittee. We had 3.5 hours on reparations for slavery. And I was the only Republican there for 2.5 out of 3.5 hours because nobody really wanted to go do that. Well, I had to, and so I took incoming fire, and I mentioned in my opening that everybody stereotypes, and we all know a little bit about this. We understand that. I mentioned that Kelly and I, when we were newlyweds, we took in an African American. We have a black son. I have a black son who's 34 years old. I was doing the Young Life Ministry and befriended Michael, and he was out on the street, and we took him in, and he's now 34. He's the father of 4 children of his own. He's doing great, but he tells us he's 6'7", by the way. Y'all seen the movie The Blind Side? That's our story. Except my kid was not an NFL prospect. It didn't quite end up. Michael's legally blind in one eye, but he's just a good man. He's become a good man. But he says that, if it were not for us, God just putting our paths together, that he would have been, in a gang and either in prison or dead. Oh, well. There's only one reason I'm telling you that. That I gave a 30-second version of, or I wanted to relate to the audience that is full of Black Panthers and, it was just like a circus. You might have seen this on TV. And when I told the 30-second inspirational story about Michael and how I have some intimate knowledge of some of the things we're going to discuss today, they booed that. Because I was told later, I didn't understand, what? Because the Black Panthers don't want any intermingling between the races. And so that was a very bad thing, that a black kid came into a white household. I mean, this is where we are. And so after that hearing, there were a crowd of people out in the hallway, and they came up, and some were, oh, I'm so sorry they treated you so badly, Congressman, whatever. I don't know. I had my feelings surgically removed back in the 80s, so you can't hurt my feelings. And so, so it teed up this opportunity, and we need to be looking for these opportunities, is the reason I'm mentioning it too. This terrible experience teed up this opportunity to have a crowd around us in the hallway, and I began to talk about the 7th core principle, human dignity, and why we believe in that. Why do Republicans, why do conservatives believe in the inherent value of every person? Oh, let me tell you why. Let me summarize it for you real quickly, because we believe in the principles articulated in the Declaration of Independence. It's America's creed, as G.K. Chesterton said, that we hold these truths to be self-evident. And by the way, what is a self-evident truth? Oh, it's something you cannot not know. Why? Because your Creator stamps it in your heart. And it says we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Notice it doesn't say we're born equal. It says we're created equal by someone. That's what the founders of this country believe, that self-evident, that our rights come from God and that we have these inalienable rights, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. See, here's what we believe. We believe every single person has inestimable dignity and value. And your value is not related in any way. Yeah. Your values, see, and I have these people like standing in the hallway, and some of them are hostile, and some of them are friendlies, and they're all looking at me like, what? And I said, your value is not related in any way to the color of your skin, or the zip code you live in, or where you went to school, or how good looking you are, or how well you play. Your value is inherent because it is given to you by your Creator. And every single person, and that's why we believe in the sanctity of human life, but the sanctity of life all the way through the spectrum from conception to natural death, and just unpack that like you can, but no, not enough people can do that anymore. And we're not actively looking for those opportunities, and we have to. Because we are losing our way, we're losing the fixed points on the horizon, and we are also losing some of the core and just critical presuppositions of a constitutional republic. I mean, we're still an experiment on the world stage. Everybody knows. July 4th, we had our 243rd anniversary, our birthday. That's awesome, but on the whole span of human history, we don't know how long this is going to last. Founders didn't know. They said there were some important foundational principles that you had to maintain to keep the republic, and people are losing that. One of the things we're losing right now is the ability to just even have a conversation with people of different philosophy and ideology. And in the Congress, y'all know in the House, there's a literal aisle down the middle. If you're in the speaker's rostrum, the Democrats are over here, Republicans are over here, and there are members of Congress that will literally not walk across the aisle. They will not cross the aisle to talk to somebody on the other side. I mean, look, the republic breaks down if you do that. The whole premise of the republic, of self-governance, government of, by, and for the people, is that the people are going to at least, they might have some heated debates, but at least they're going to debate, right? You have to get people with very different philosophies sometimes together around a corner and debate and arm wrestle or whatever, but you reach consensus that does the most good for the most people, and we're losing the ability to do that, which is why the American people are losing faith in their institutions, which is the greatest peril that we have in maintaining the republic. The lack of knowledge, this lack of understanding. So out of birth, again, something birthed out of necessity. I came in the last Congress, the 115th. My freshman class, we had 55 members of Congress. So we had far liberal Democrats all the way to me, okay, on the other side. And from all over the country. And we went together on our retreat. It has become customary for the new members of Congress to go on a freshman retreat a couple days after you take your oath of office that weekend. It's early January. You go, they put you on an Amtrak and you go to Colonial Williamsburg and you spend the weekend together. And they have all these great tours and stuff lined up. Well, our problem was in our class, this is in January 2017, when it started snowing on the way to the resort, and we literally got snowed into the hotel for 3 days, okay? Now, we have all our families with us. Kelly and I have our 4 kids, and everybody has all their kids, and the snow piled up about 5 feet high outside the window. We got stuck in the hotel for 3 days, all these new members of Congress. Turned out to be a great blessing because we got to know each other really, really, really well. It was like camp, sort of. And so on the last session, I believe it was a providential thing. So all the members, somebody had the idea. Jack Bergman said, let's have a members-only, final session, kumbaya session before the snow is beginning to melt. They're going to let us go back to D.C. And so they sent all the family, all the press, all the staff, everybody. It was just the 55 of us. And so we were seated in a U-shaped table in a room about the third of this size, and everybody went around and they gave their parting comments over the weekend and their impressions and what are we going to do over the next couple of years. And so what struck me was that every single person, almost, maybe 53 out of 55 said basically the same thing. They said it in their own dialect and accent in their own way, but they all said the same thing. I am so sick of the tone of our politics. I hate what Washington's become. Congress has an approval level just higher than pancreatic cancer because nobody believes in this anymore. And everybody's a real idealist in the first week, right? I ran for Congress because I wanted to do it differently. And by golly, we've all gotten to know each other so well. Can we be the class that changes the tone? And I was really inspired by this and struck that everybody said the same thing. And so, but I'm also a lawyer, and so I'm jaded, and I know that this is not going to last. So I went back to the hotel room, and Kelly's like, you need to go to sleep, we got to go. No. So I sat up all night and I drafted this one-page document called the Commitment to Civility. It took all night because I had to condense it to one page, but I summarized in about 5 or 6 paragraphs the sentiment that everybody had shared. And it's just basic stuff. It's basically follow the golden rule. That we're going to treat one another with dignity and respect. That when I'm arguing the other side of a policy issue with somebody at the other side of the corner or the other side of the aisle, other side of the table, that's not my enemy. That's a fellow American, right? Our enemy's like, ISIS and Kim Jong-un at the time, not Nancy Pelosi. Bless her heart. I don't agree with anything she says, okay? But she's not my enemy. She's a fellow American. And what I'm supposed to do, the way this thing is set up in a constitutional republic is I'm supposed to go and try to build a relationship with her and convince her of the correctness of my philosophy and argument. You have to have an ability to do that. So I drafted the Commitment to Civility. I sheepishly presented it to all my classmates, and I said, I wonder if any of you would be willing to sign a contract with one another. Now, this sounded good in our kumbaya moment, but would you put your name on a document, and would you commit a commitment to one another that we're going to treat one another with dignity and respect? Look, I'm a father of 4. I teach my children this. The least I can do is do the same thing. We're ostensibly leaders in the country. And 53 out of 55 members of the class signed it. So then a little bit later, we have the tragic shooting on the baseball field. And my brother Steve gets shot, and everybody knows the saga. Well, in the days following that shooting, the lack of civility now reaches the national consciousness. In every channel, everybody's talking about it. Oh, it's so bad now it's leading to physical violence, and they're trying to kill members of Congress, And so Paul Ryan came to me and he said, hey, love that freshman class project. You ought to think about floating that around the whole Congress. And I said, great, we will. So Charlie Crist and I co-founded the Honor and Civility Caucus, and we began to take this broader. And so, look, if it's any consolation, if it's any hope to you, you'll never hear this on the news. But we have 157 members of Congress, leaders and luminaries on both sides of the aisle, who have signed the Commitment to Civility and are trying, against the odds, to get back to some of these things that really do make America great. And I'm way out of time. I'm so sorry. Look, let me. Can I just read something to you to close? And because I could be up here all night, and I got so much to share with you. But talking about how we're losing the foundations, and if somebody asked you, if you were in that setting last night with us, with Mr. Koch and the leaders there, some of you probably should have been. But if you were asked, what is the greatest threat, or turn it another way, what is the most important thing to keep a republic? So. In Congress, I represent 760,000 people. Each member of Congress does about that number, and so we get just this huge volume of mail. And I have 3 staffers, and all they do is answer correspondence for us. But on occasion, they'll bring me one that's really a ringer, and they brought me this one. I just want to read this to you, and I'll close with this. I'm rounding third, Bob. This came from a civics teacher at a place not too couple hours from here. But let me read this to you, and I'll read you my response, and I think it'll speak for itself, and I'll be done. Dear Congressman Johnson, I teach civics in your district. I would love for you to send a response to the following question. What is the most important thing needed for a republic to survive? I will share your response with my students and use it to start the discussion. Thank you, James K. McKay, Oakdale High School. So I wrote this. Dear James, thank you for your dedication to the students at Oakdale High School and for inspiring them to understand and appreciate civics, our Constitution, and the exceptional features of our republic. Our nation depends upon well-informed, involved citizens, and we need more of them. As Ronald Reagan famously said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. I am delighted to answer the question you posed, what is the most important thing needed for a republic to survive? In fact, this is one of my favorite topics, because I was a disciple of Bob McEwen. No, I have debated it at length, and I've written and lectured on the issue for nearly 20 years. Practicing constitutional law convinced me this central question is no longer a rhetorical one, but one that all of us must answer today. I have taught lengthy seminars on this topic, but I can summarize a volume of my thoughts by simply echoing the sentiments of our first 2 presidents. In his historic farewell address, the father of our country, George Washington, provided his clear answer to that question, and that sage advice echoes down through the generations to us today. And he said, of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. And John Adams came next, and he said, he had the same conviction. He said, our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. In other words, what these two founders and their fellow patriots all understood from history was that there are many important rules and practices that can help build and sustain a healthy republic. But the key and the essential foundation of a republic must be a common commitment among the citizenry to the principles of religion and morality. The founders acknowledged the self-evident truths that all men are created equal and that God gives all men the same inalienable rights. However, they knew that in order to maintain a government of, by, and for the people, as Lincoln later said, those inalienable rights must be exercised in a responsible manner. They thus believed in liberty that is legitimately constrained by a common sense of morality and a healthy fear of the God who granted all men our rights. The founders understood that all men are fallen and that power corrupts. And they also knew that no amount of institutional checks and balances or decentralization of power in civil authorities would be sufficient to maintain a just government if the men in charge had no fear of eternal judgment by a power higher than their temporal institutions. The founders often quoted the scripture that admonishes the fear of the Lord as the beginning of wisdom. The majority of the founders, having personally witnessed the abuses of the Church of England, clearly wanted to avoid the official establishment of any single national denomination or religion. However, they very deliberately listed religious liberty, the free exercise of religion, as the first freedom protected in the Bill of Rights, because they wanted everyone to freely live out their faith, as that would ensure a robust presence of moral virtue in the public square and the free marketplace of ideas. A free society and a healthy republic depend upon religious and moral virtue not only because they help prevent political corruption and the abuse of power in that republic, but also because those convictions in the minds and hearts of the people make it possible to preserve their essential freedoms by emphasizing and inspiring individual responsibility, self-sacrifice, the dignity of hard work, the rule of law, civility, patriotism, responsibility, self-sacrifice, the value of family and community, the sanctity of every human life. Without those virtues, indispensably supported by religion and morality, every republic will ultimately fail. Inscribed on the third panel of the Jefferson Memorial here in Washington, D.C., is this sobering reminder to every American. God, who gave us life, gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are the gift of God? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever. The experience of history teaches that these principles are universal and have applied to every republic through the centuries. They certainly apply to our nation today. Alexa de Tocqueville is credited with a keen observation that America is great because she is good, and if she ever ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. That has been the key to our exceptionalism. Our republic depends upon it now more than ever, and it is our job, to instill and preserve it. I apologize for the length of this response. Their government shutdown gave us all a little extra time in the House this Saturday afternoon as we wait for the Senate to act. Thank you again for encouraging your students to carefully consider these important questions. Please give them all my warmest regards. For freedom, Mike Johnson, U.S. Congress, 4th District of Louisiana. Thank you. Oh. Thank you. That's another surreal moment for the Journal. I'm going to say this. I'm done. I'm going to quote the Gipper because you have to when you're on this subject. We said a constitutional experiment is still an experiment on the world stage. We're only 243 years into this. We don't know how long it can last. January 25th, 1974, Ronald Reagan, maybe a couple of y'all might have been there. He spoke to the first Conservative Political Action Conference. And that's the speech where he first invoked the biblical metaphor, the shining city on a hill. And he said this, and you know the words, and I'll just close with this. We cannot escape our destiny, nor should we try to do so. The leadership of the free world was thrust upon us 2 centuries ago in that little hall of Philadelphia. In the days following World War II, when the economic strength and power of America was all that stood between the world and the return of the Dark Ages, Pope Pius XII said, "The American people have a great genius for splendid and unselfish actions. Into the hands of America, God has placed the destinies of an afflicted mankind. We are indeed, and we are today, the last best hope of man on earth." We are. And the Republic will survive, and the Republic will thrive so long as all of you keep doing what it is that God has called you to do. And I am so grateful for it. I can't tell you how grateful members of Congress are, the conservatives in the House, to know that you are doing what you do. Thank you for that. Thanks for the opportunity. And I'm sorry I went over time.
Wow, Congressman Mike Johnson, who I just met this evening, and many of us have just met. Louisiana is lucky to have you. Congress is lucky to have you. We are lucky to have you. The country is lucky to have you. My God. And he's a lawyer. How does that work? He's a lawyer. Your faith, your passion, your energy, your intellect, and tonight, your candor with us. Don't do this with a lot of people, but we appreciated your candor. I mean, Bob, out of the ballpark by bringing Congressman Johnson to us. We will pray for you. We need more of you in Congress, but we will take just you for now. We will take you, and we will pray.